Hi there. My name's Nick Throp, co-founder of Like Minds. And given the nature of today's topic, inclusion, diversity, and belonging, we thought it was important that you heard from a range of different voices to give you some different perspectives. So you'll not only hear from me on this video, but you'll also be hearing from Nikki Thompson and Alex Burdekin, also from the Like Minds team. Like Minds is an independent creative agency specialising in developing engagement programmes to help ordinary people make the most of their lifetime savings. We work with trustees, sponsoring employers and providers to help people connect with their pension. And it's in that context, I think, that inclusion, diversity and belonging are really important concepts for us in the work that we do. And that's because they're not just abstract, they're actually part of the everyday lived experience, in fact, of us all in some form or another. And when we're trying to engage people with saving for the future, we're always looking to connect the future with their lives as they're lived now. And in the work that we do, we really can't ignore how people feel about themselves, how they think and feel about the world around them, how they think and feel about other people, about money, what their core values are, how they think about society. All of those things actually influence the ways in which they think and act in relation to long-term saving. So in many ways, these are really sort of the raw materials of our work. And inclusion, diversity and belonging are really fundamental aspects of the human experience. Our goal as an organisation has always been to try to make the pensions industry rather more human and less abstract, maybe a bit more empathetic and less intellectual, and more about meeting people where they are now than trying to get them to imagine where they might be in 10, 20, 30, 40 years' time. And that's why this subject is so important to us.
Hi, I'm Alex Burdekin from Like Minds. We're all different, with different experiences, education, income, confidence, and cognitive ability. We have different genders, ethnicity, and age. We have different relationships, values, physical ability, and mental health. It's what makes us unique. So when it comes to inclusion, diversity, and belonging, recognizing that we're all starting from a different place is the first thing that we can do to understand the world better and the people around us. Doing this both prompts questions and answers for us to be able to create a more equitable world. For us, inclusion is about creating equal opportunities that allow for greater fairness and social justice for all, but particularly those who might otherwise be excluded or marginalised. Diversity is the presence of difference. Our identities are what makes each of us unique, and these should not be discriminated against systemically or otherwise. And belonging is the need we all have to feel like we truly belong somewhere, feeling connected to others and accepted for who we are. These principles should run through the entire experience of saving for a pension. Only recently have we been seeing a greater shift in the industry, with a drive for more diverse trustee boards, consideration of communication formats and channels to be both more accessible to everybody, and the acknowledgement of the challenges that some people face when it comes to saving for and accessing their pension. What we want to do is change how saving for a pension feels so that anyone can make informed decisions about their future, both with greater confidence and overall just simply feel better about the whole process for saving. There is a lot of work to do, but we must all continue to challenge ourselves every day to build a fair and exclusive industry that speaks to everyone so that no one feels left behind.
Hi, I'm Nikki Thompson, also from Like Minds. I think it's probably worth starting off by saying that the pensions industry does care about the impact of social injustice, and in many ways, at its most basic level, the pensions industry should and does care about these things because it's the right thing to do. But in line with the rest of society, that sensitivity to social injustice and inequity has sharpened over recent years. And there's an increasing awareness of issues like the gender and ethnicity savings gaps. So as an industry, our role is to deliver better retirement outcomes for the members of our schemes. And so we should be doing our best to understand what the barriers might be to achieving those outcomes. Many industry developments over recent years are responding to this agenda, and that's things like the impact of auto enrolment, it's the introduction of retirement living standards, social and governance aspects of responsible investment. But there's still more to be done, and there is an awareness that pension professionals not only have to respond to what's happening in inclusion, diversity and belonging, but also that we have a role to play in addressing some of those societal issues through the power of pensions to change people's lives. So one of the challenges that we think needs further attention is cognitive diversity. So that's recognising that people process information differently, and that can lead to very different perspectives. The pensions industry hasn't been great at catering for these different learning processes, and we think that's something that in our role we can do something about. The industry is also aware of its own shortcomings in terms of the lack of representation. The cliche of what that sort of traditional trustee board looks like is a cliche exactly because it's true in many cases. But increasingly, we're being asked to help broaden out trustee representation by helping schemes communicate things like the skills and the strengths that a trustee board needs, and how important it is that everybody sees themselves as a potential candidate and doesn't feel excluded. But perhaps the biggest obstacle to greater inclusivity and diversity in pensions is actually the prevailing mindset that the pensions experts are the most important people in the process. We think we need a bit of a revolution in how the industry thinks. The industry has to become much more member-centric, to be obsessed with listening to, with empathising with, and understanding who people are and what their lives are like. So how much do we really know about members of a pension scheme beyond a few data points? Really challenge yourselves about how much you know about your membership. And if you find that difficult, you probably have some work to do.
So what we're campaigning for is a truly inclusive engagement strategy, which members are the heart of. A good starting point for anyone is a period of self-reflection. So ask yourself things like this. What's your story? How did you get to be where you are today? And where did you start off? How has your journey and experiences shaped you? Have you ever felt excluded from the conversation? And how has it felt in situations where you felt like you truly belonged? Once you start to reflect, you can then start to look around you and understand how others might feel in similar circumstances. Has everything always been equal? Have you ever been able to not access anything with ease? Have you ever been denied an opportunity because of who you are or where you've come from? When we start to answer some of these questions ourselves, especially for the first time, we can begin to see how even though two people might be subjected to the same situation, their experiences can be completely different. And for us to open the doors wider, we need the support of everybody within the industry, and self-awareness and understanding are really important first steps of the process. When we talk about a best practice approach, what we want to see is pension schemes really thinking about the kind of experience they want to deliver to their membership and focusing intently on how they can make that better. That starts with advisors, providers, sponsoring employers, and trustees putting members at the heart of everything that they do. Once you've started to do this, the next thing to do is simple. Listen. And we really mean listen. Listen to everything that your membership tells you and take every opportunity to get to know them better. A good test is the extent to which you can actually articulate who your membership is, what their hopes and fears are, and what their story is. Because everyone's story matters, and it's those stories that tell you about their world and their perspective that can really make a difference.
The world of pensions has tended to be dominated by the logical and analytical, so that slower system 2 thought process that Daniel Kahneman describes, rather than the instinctive and the emotional, which is that quicker system 1 thinking. So with that in mind, the hope has kind of been, if only we can explain this incredibly complex thing by describing how the mechanics of it work, people might understand it and make better decisions as a result. And, information and the how it works is really important. But in the world of cognitive diversity, we have to become more adept at making emotional connections with people. So some of the insights and the stories generated by understanding diversity issues can be a way to generate that emotional connection with people. The words and the pictures that you use matter too. The words we use can exclude, and it's important to think hard about the tone of voice that you want to use. There's also a genuine frustration among members at the use of imagery that doesn't actually represent the lives they lead or really acknowledge the fact that they have other priorities and commitments and that pensions need to fit in with those. One thing it's probably important to say is that being sensitive to how people feel about their own situation doesn't mean that we have to be humorless about it. Humour remains a really important part of human connection, but it doesn't have to be unkind. The important part of using humour is always that it feels like it's being inclusive rather than it's drawing more dividing lines. Another thing is the choice of communication channels. That can exclude people too. Going completely digital, for instance, might exclude those who just prefer old school communications, a chat on the phone or a personable letter written by a human rather than a machine. So the key really is to ask rather than assume. So how would people prefer to be communicated with, and how can you make it easier and more accessible for them? We can be in danger of stereotyping if we don't ask the questions. So as an example, it's often said that older people don't want to use technology, but actually the Financial Lives survey in 2020 found that online banking increased significantly in popularity among older age groups between 2017 and 2020. And also, of course, COVID has changed how that older generation thinks about technology and their willingness to use it. So ask your membership how they use technology in other parts of their lives and what works well for them and what doesn't. Ultimately, we think an inclusive engagement strategy will involve different channels selected by the membership themselves. And lastly, just while we're on the subject of technology, it's also worth mentioning the importance of accessibility. There are accessibility standards for web and mobile design, and your digital channels should all meet those standards. We think that practice makes better, but perfect doesn't really exist. Better is good, though. And if we can continuously improve, we'll make significant progress in connecting more people with their pensions and with their future selves. We think that the subject needs to be approached with some humility and with a willingness to engage in discussion. None of us have all the answers, but the thing is to keep on learning about who your members are and what they think and feel. If you know that better in a year or two's time, then you are making progress. So a truly inclusive engagement strategy is really one that learns as it goes along and adapts and changes along the way. And it isn't afraid of challenges and new ways of thinking based on feedback from the people it's aiming to help. So good is a continuous evolution, constantly learning and continuing to challenge ourselves.
The important thing for us is that our commitment to inclusion, diversity and belonging is driven by the team. 18 months ago, when George Floyd's murder happened, the team actually came to us and asked us some really challenging questions about our approach to this topic. And that's such an important characteristic of Like Mind's commitment to this topic, that it's not from the top down. This is really driven by the team themselves. And from that, we developed an inclusion and diversity group at Like Minds, where everyone's invited to attend. The meetings happen sort of on a monthly basis. And at those meetings, the team's really invited to explore areas that they're particularly interested in or they think are important in relation to inclusion and diversity, or where they think Like Minds could do better. So that's really our kind of core forum, if you like, to discuss these topics. But we also use Workplace extensively to share content, share knowledge, insights, inspiration, and so on. And we have within Workplace an inclusion and diversity group where the team share with colleagues interesting things that they come across in relation to inclusion and diversity. So that could be articles, websites, podcasts, could be book reviews. All of this is really meant to help us share knowledge and create a better understanding and make us all better informed about this subject. In terms of where we are, we feel like we've started on the path of making ourselves more aware of the challenges that people face, but we still think we have an awful lot more to learn. So our commitment, I think, is primarily to that process and then taking action as we become more aware of what we collectively and individually could do better.